In 1991, police in Madrid opened an official investigation into a murder case unlike anything they'd ever seen before. The suspect wasn't alive. It wasn't a criminal on the run, a missing person, or a cold case. In fact, it wasn't a person at all. This was the first time in Spanish history where law enforcement launched a formal investigation into a ghost. A full police unit was involved. The police chief was personally briefed. Officers were deployed. And the whole city buzzed with disbelief, because how do you investigate a suspect you can't even see? The case file was thin. No gender, no age, no name, no origin, no motive. Just reports of strange activity and one word whispered over and over again. Ghost. And yet the officers pressed forward. They questioned witnesses. They entered the alleged haunted home. And what they discovered inside is something they later claimed no human could have done. One of them even said, on record, "After what I saw with my own eyes, I'm convinced. This wasn't a person's doing. This was something else." Everything they saw, everything they felt, was officially recorded. It's all documented. And at the center of it all was an ordinary teenage girl, 18-year-old Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro. She lived just outside Madrid in a modest apartment complex known as Luis Marion Apartment Number 8. Estefania had recently been accepted into college. She had a younger brother, a sister, and loving parents. By all accounts, her life was completely normal. Until it wasn't. Shortly after she began college, her behavior began to shift, first subtly, then violently. It started with her younger brother. She would growl at him, not jokingly, animalistically. Then came the hissing, loud, sharp, serpentine sounds from her mouth. And then the attacks. She tried to lunge at him. She clawed at the wooden walls with her fingernails. She screamed. She cried. She writhed. Her parents were horrified. They tried speaking to her. Sometimes she'd snap out of it like nothing ever happened. Other times, it was like someone, or something, else had taken over her body. And then her health began to spiral. She stopped eating. She barely slept. She grew thinner, weaker, more erratic. It was as if something inside her was slowly draining her life away. When her parents finally confronted her, desperate for answers, Estefania told them something they couldn't explain. She said, almost every night, around midnight, "I see something. A shadow. I don't know what it is, but it's not human. Every time it comes, I feel strange, and after that, I can't control myself. I start scratching the walls. I hiss. I don't remember why." That's when her parents realized. This wasn't just a mental breakdown. This was something else entirely. And whatever it was just getting started. It was discovered that these occult books were having a serious effect on her. The family were Catholic Christians and had strong faith in their religion. But alongside that, the girl, Estefania, had been reading books related to black magic and the supernatural. Her parents believed that these books were influencing her negatively. So they removed all such books from her room. But even after that, nothing improved. Time went by, and over the next 6 months, Estefania's health continued to decline. Her parents consulted many doctors. Some even suggested taking her to priests for spiritual help. They did, but no one, neither the doctors nor the priests, could find anything wrong with her. She had no surgical problem, no mental disorder. Physically, she was fine. And yet, her behavior was changing drastically. Her condition was getting worse by the day. Her parents were deeply worried for their daughter. And then 6 months later, something tragic happened. In August, as her condition continued to deteriorate, she became very weak. Her parents couldn't take it anymore and admitted her to a government hospital in Madrid. They wanted a full diagnosis to finally know what was going on. At the hospital, every test was conducted. All kinds of experts examined her. She remained under care for 3 weeks. But the doctors couldn't find any illness. They said, she's completely healthy. Then came the big question. If she's healthy, then why is her condition worsening? 3 weeks later, one night, Estefania seemed completely normal. Her family visited. She looked fine. This was August 2018. And then, suddenly, she died. Her family couldn't believe it. Just hours before, they had met her, and she was smiling. All the strange behavior, the odd events, had continued, but no illness had ever been found. So now came the real question. How did she die? Even the doctors were shocked. They performed an autopsy. The report only said, cardiac arrest. That was the official cause of death. There were no wounds on her body, no bruises, no symptoms. People couldn't wrap their heads around it. An 18-year-old girl dying of a heart attack? It just didn't make sense. Even the doctors admitted the postmortem made no sense. After her funeral, her parents returned home and decided to preserve her room exactly the way she left it. They cleaned it, changed the sheets, and kept all her childhood items. Books, toys, clothes, everything. They locked the room. Now and then, they'd open it for cleaning. At first, nothing strange happened. But then, about a week later, they noticed something chilling every time they cleaned and organized the room. The next time they opened it, everything was in disarray. Bed sheets on the floor, books scattered, frames on the walls, flipped upside down. At first, they thought maybe a neighbor was messing with them. But no, the room had been locked the entire time. For days later, it happened again. This time, even the Jesus Christ portrait was upside down. Now, things were becoming deeply disturbing. Then, something new started. At night, strange sounds began to come from Seraphina's room. Most haunting of all, a voice crying out, "Mama, Mama," calling out for her mother. The voice was filled with pain. When the family opened the door, they felt a cold wind sweeping through the room. But when they looked out the window, the night outside was completely still. Inside, everything was in disarray again. This kept happening for days. They noticed deep scratch marks on the wooden walls, like someone had clawed them violently, with fingernails. They even thought it might be a prank. But the door had been locked. So, they sealed the room completely and placed a wooden board across the door, hoping to keep whatever was inside trapped. But the very next night, an icy wind rushed through the house. Once again, the same cry echoed through the dark, "Mama." And then, the locked door's bolt opened on its own. The door creaked open. The family was terrified. They were trembling. Still, the nail scratches on the wall remained. And now they were convinced something was still in that room. They checked again. No neighbor could have done this. So they told the neighbors. Most laughed. Ghosts? Moving paintings? Scratches. But a few neighbors confessed they too had heard screams from the house at night. Some brave neighbors came inside. They saw the room. Everything seemed fine. And then, sudden cold wind blew. Pictures flipped on the wall. Now the neighbors were scared too. And they became witnesses. Around the same time, 2 or 3 teachers from Estefania's college came to visit. It had been over 15 days since her death. They asked to speak privately with her parents. One teacher said, "We should have told you this earlier, but we didn't know how. We didn't know if you'd believe us." They shared a story from 6 to 7 months ago. Seraphina's friend had lost her boyfriend in a motorcycle accident. She was devastated. And soon after, 4 girls, including Seraphina and this friend, were seen sitting behind the school building around a wooden table. There was a glass turned upside down in the middle. They were using it like a Ouija board, trying to talk to spirits. The teacher had spotted them. She scolded them, broke the board in anger, but then the glass rose in the air and spun. The teacher was frozen in fear. Later, the girls told her that Estefania loved talking about ghosts, read books on black magic, and claimed to talk to spirits, even her friend's dead boyfriend. That was when it all began. And after the board broke, a white mist had come out of nowhere, entered through Seraphina's nose, and disappeared. That's when everything started changing in her. Once again, the family opened Estefania's room. Inside, the scene was disturbing. Pictures were upside down. Her belongings were scattered all over the floor. One of Estefania's photos, which had been displayed on a stand, had fallen to the floor. When her mother tried to pick it up, something strange happened. The frame slipped from her hands and dropped back to the floor as if someone pushed it. Her father stepped in to help, but as soon as he lifted the frame, he noticed something terrifying. The image of Estefania behind the glass had changed. It became hazy. Her face seemed to shift. Only her eyes were clearly visible, moving. Shocked, the father threw the frame on the floor. And at that very moment, a loud echoed through the house, as if something had fallen hard. The rest of the night passed in fear. The next morning, the family called a plumber and jammed the door to her room shut with heavy furniture, a sofa, cabinets, anything that could keep it from opening again. But that night, a piercing cold wind swept through the house. It felt like something inside the room wanted to break out. Moments later, the lock on the door unlatched itself. The sofa blocking it was flung aside, and the door slowly creaked open. The family was frozen in fear. They began to ask themselves, should we leave this house? But the following night brought something far more horrifying, something they had never experienced before. Around midnight, as Estefania's mother was asleep, suddenly, she felt a weight on her chest. Something heavy was pressing down, choking her with both hands. She tried to fight it off, but no one was there. Still, she could feel something invisible strangling her. Her husband, seeing her struggle, jumped up and pulled her away, barely freeing her from whatever force had held her down. She was trembling, in shock, and for the first time since all this began, from the strange behavior, to the hospital stay, to Estefania's death, to the haunting events, they called the police. At exactly 2:40 a.m., they phoned the local station. Within 10 minutes, a police team arrived at the apartment. There were 5 officers in total, including National Police Inspector Josh Petrel. The officers spoke with the family, and the mother explained, "Something tried to strangle me." When the officers stepped inside, they too felt a chilling draft. Unusual noises could be heard, though outside, the night was still and quiet. They asked, "Can we see the room?" When they entered, the room was a mess. Frames were upside down. Bed sheets were on the floor. Books were scattered everywhere. Then, a sudden gust of wind rushed through the room, like a storm. The officers opened the window to check outside, but there was nothing, no breeze, no wind. Outside, everything was completely calm. Now the police were scared too. They didn't know how to explain what was happening. They calmed the family and left when the sun came up, but they promised to return and investigate further. And they did. The next night, the police came back. This time, the family asked them to stay and see it with their own eyes. That night, Estefania's father told the officers about something bizarre that had been happening to his younger son. He said, "It feels like someone picks him up and throws him, like a football." At first, the officers didn't believe him, but then, as the child sat on one of the beds, right in front of the police, he was suddenly thrown through the air and landed on the other bed. Then, a picture on the wall turned upside down on its own. Books flew. Objects were tossed around. This was the first moment the officers realized, there is something in this house. They went back to the station and filed an official report. They wrote, "We witnessed the door opening on its own. The latch broke. Cold air rushed in. There was noise, wind, but the weather outside was calm." The media got hold of the story. The police spoke openly. They described everything they had seen. The house was then thoroughly investigated, not for days, not for weeks, but for months. They searched for hidden devices, traps, prank mechanisms, anything that could explain the activity. They found nothing. Finally, the police chief gave the family one piece of advice: leave the house. By now, Estefania's parents were so exhausted and afraid, they didn't argue. They left that apartment forever. And from that day on, for the past 30 years, not a single paranormal event has occurred again. The police documented the entire case, and today it remains one of Spain's most mysterious, chilling, and officially recorded supernatural investigations. A case that was investigated by the police, but where the suspect was never seen.